I've known Simon for a year or two through various combinations, and it's really delightful to have you here. Simon, firstly, tell us what choirs have you recently been involved in? I mean, the one begins with T, obviously, and things like that. And tell us what you're up to now.
Great. Well, as you were just introducing me, I think it's probably about 25 years that we've known each other. So there's some sort of jubilee celebration that needs to happen at some point. Yeah, for many years, I was the director of music and assistant head at Tiffin School, which is in Kingston upon Thames State Grammar School, very fine. And one of my roles there was to conduct the choir. So we did quite a lot of work together, you and I, Bob, there on big oratorios and concerts and so on. And that was tremendous fun. Not only doing these concerts around the world, we went to New Zealand, Australia, and China, and America, and everything, and doing some really great oratorios like Child of Our Time, and obviously Verdi Requiem and Gerontius many times. But of course, also the boys at that school work at Covent Garden and with the major London orchestras and so on. So that was great fun. So I did that until 2015, and alongside that, latterly I've become a director of the Eton choral courses, just operate in the summer for young people aged 16 to 21, and Ralph Allwood founded those in the early 1980s. And have made such an impact on the choral life of this country. It's like a couple of years education packed into 1 week, and really powerfully, especially now, where we've been able to raise a significant amount of money for bursaries. We've got students coming, boys and girls from around the country, and meeting up with like-minded people, in many cases for the first time, to sing with 70 people your own age, this great repertoire, like, Take 'em Earth for Cherishing, or Rejoice in the Lamb, in St. Cecilia and stuff, is really life-changing for them. So I've been doing that and continue to. These are now called the Rodolphus Foundation choral courses, and there are 9 of them in total, starting with junior courses for children aged 8 and then going way up to 23, 24. And then 5 years ago, I moved up to Northampton and took up a post as director of music for a large multi-academy trust called the David Ross Education Trust. And David, the big philanthropist and supporter of the arts and sport, now the chair of the Royal Opera House. And his vision for these state schools, 34 of them in the East Midlands and East of England, going right up to Bridlington, is that the kind of education he had at Uppingham should be there in state schools. So I've been working for the last 5 years at implementing that, and particularly being based at one in Northampton called Malcolm Arnold Academy. And the first thing I did when I got there was to form a new choir, which we called the Chapel Choir, because there's a chapel there, tiny little chapel, but it's great. And they've become rather good. In fact, we did a joint concert with you, Bob, at St. Martin in the Fields earlier this year. So it's extraordinary to think that there were concerts earlier this year. And that was great, doing jointly with Tiffin. And they're really fantastic. This is an ordinary comprehensive school. And what I wanted to do when I went up there was to really see whether what I really believed, that every child has access to great music and can do it, is actually achievable. And it is. So this time last year, we did Messiah with the Britten Sinfonia at Neville Holt. Neville Holt Opera, extraordinary partner for us. We are also one of the choirs in Gabrielli Raw with Paul McCreish on that great disc of English Coronation. And in fact, that was with the youth choir that we formed from this trust, which is a little bit of a story about this, which is quite fun. We have the whole business of trying to improve musical opportunities for young people is to do with working in partnership, and not trying to do it yourself on your own. So with Neville Holt, and also with Garsington back in the day, and Gabrielli's, we had a partnership project with our secondary schools, and we asked every secondary school to nominate up to 12 students who are passionate about singing in whatever form that might be, you know, whether it's music theatre, which is actually a really big thing in rural Lincolnshire. Lots and lots of amateur am-dram societies and music theatre works in schools, or rock and pop music, or classical and opera. And so they nominated these 100 children, and we gave them singing lessons every fortnight, but on a songbook repertoire that we created of Italian arie antiche, so Caro mio ben, O Dome Dolce, O Stavicino, and so on. And it was just brilliant to see the way in which all of these children identified with this music so well. And I think, well, maybe we'll talk about it a bit later. But anyway, as a result of that, we then formed a youth choir, and they took part in Gabriele Raw. And the first project was this whopping great performance of coronation anthems in Ely Cathedral with an associated recording, which had Simon Russell Beale as the Archbishop of Canterbury, Paul McCreesh as the king, as it happens, so he's not credited on the disc, and 300 kids from state schools singing Walton Coronation Te Deum alongside professionals. And this whopping great orchestra with people like Nick Daniel as principal oboe, playing the original oboe that Goossens used in the 1937 coronation. And it was an amazing experience. And these kids from there, we've got now got some of those who've gone on just being accepted at Conservatoire as tenors, you know, which is amazing. Had our first musician get into the NYO. So that, to answer your question, is what I've been up to, really. It's really great fun.
And this must be quite exciting because you get a lot of backing from David Ross in this. This is.
Yeah, I mean well,
a lot of music teachers are battling, aren't they, in schools?
The backing is about value. It's not about finance, I have to say. That comes from elsewhere. In fact, most of it comes from the government, and it can be done. But the most important thing we need in schools is for people to recognize the value of music education and the value of it done well. So it's not just David. I mean, look, basically, David is a classic multimillionaire who will tell you what to do initially and then empower you to do it and then say, sort it out. And that's what I was told. It's right. Sort out music in schools.
Did you find that a pressure?
No, not at all. I would have done had I been told to sort out schools or sort out English and maths teaching, because there are actually quantifiable results at the end of that in terms of they've got to pass their GCSEs and they've got to do it well. And likewise with A-level. And unfortunately, so often the solution to that in the country has been, right, our livelihoods depend on this in education, so we're going to shut down everything else. We're just going to focus on those subjects and cram them. Now, we as musicians know that's nonsense. You know, it'd be like saying to a choir, we've got a really important concert in 2 years' time, so the only thing we're going to do is that repertoire. That doesn't build a choir. You know, you have to get them doing it regularly, and also to realize that a concert is joyful. And so it's what has happened as a result of that, though, is gradually over 5 years, the climate has changed. And I have to say, not just at Dret, but I think across the country. I think it's more positive than the headlines often say, because it is ultimately about people, and you affect change by talking to people and winning them over, you know, not bashing them over the head and saying you're not doing it right. So we have to persuade. And I mean, I've been really pleased with how things have gone here. I mean, to the extent that after the first lockdown, when schools returned in September, our 22 primary schools all decided that they'd have daily music as part of the recovery curriculum. Because this is going to be the vital thing, the way in which we rebuild our communities. Anyway, they decided all this, and they put together a draft timetable, and then they came to me and to ask me if that was okay. which is brilliant. So that's definitely the right way around. But to be a bit less facetious about it, I think the reason it works there is because they've seen it work in other schools. One of the things I had to do early on was persuade decision makers that not only that music in schools is important, but actually what music in schools should look like. Because I don't think most people have actually seen outstanding music making in school. I think most people have actually had a really bad experience. And everyone can talk about a music lesson that's gone wrong, or those who have gone into the profession, or those who've become audiences in spite of their classroom music experience. It's been because of being in choirs or orchestras or pop groups or whatever, where there has been that sense of authenticity, and you're handling the sound, and often the classroom is either seen as an irrelevance or something that hasn't been as serious as English and maths. So there are lots of things to be done there, but I think the most important thing is for people to work in partnership and to be able to see really what children can actually do.
Wow, brilliant. If nothing else, passionate.
Yeah,
I love it.
Well, I think it does help, because you've got to, we all know that this is important, don't we? And but rather than just saying it's important, do it. We need to articulate why, and to
demonstrate,
to show that actually music is about joy and fulfillment. And heaven only knows, we've got such an issue in this country and around the world of people not having that. And it's something that we can, we can nurture in people. So that's been keeping me quite busy, really.
Yeah. And just squeezing a little bit of cricket watching, do you?
Yeah. Of course, we both follow cricket. I have to say, following cricket in Northampton, whilst there's a great ground at Wantage Road, which is just round the corner from my office, it's not the greatest side. It's not like it was following Surrey. You'll be sitting there, and it'll be, and Northampton will be batting, so there'll only be two of them out on the field. And then the ice cream van will come, and they all run to the ice cream van. It's ridiculous. These are professional cricketers. So it's not the most athletic team, but it's great to be out there, and that whole atmosphere of bat and ball, and and
anyway, I think we're luxuriating here. We could go
you on, you told me to treat this as if I was with you in the pub.
Indeed. And we would definitely get there, wouldn't we?
We certainly would. And how about you? So I've been hearing about this amazing project for Christmas. I've read about it in the Times. That's a great article.
Must have read the Times this week, then. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought I thought you'd be surfacing at some point, because you are the most resourceful impresario that I know. Always thinking about what people need, and also what the opportunity is there. So how have you found doing the whole virtual?
Well, for me, some of the people here, for some of them, this will be very dull and boring because it's repetitive. But I had COVID back in March and was pretty seriously ill, and I took me a long time to get over. I just had no energy. I was sleeping 9 hours a night and then going to bed in the afternoon for a 2-hour nap.
Yeah,
this is not really my style,
Sounding like my father.
Exactly. So that was it did lay me low. And Matt kept on ringing me up about every 2 or 3 weeks and saying, "Hey Bob, why don't we do something online?" And I'm going, no, it's rubbish. It doesn't work. It's rubbish. Come on, we've got to do something. And eventually, I was getting slightly better, and he was nagging me more and more. And so we invented this thing, and it's been brilliant. And it was, for me, it was the elixir, because I went from literally, as I say, so that's sleeping 11 hours a day to working 11 hours a day overnight. Yeah. And we went from conception to launch in 7 days.
Great.
And just launched it and said, let's try this. And we've certainly changed it pretty much every month as we've gone along. We've learned as we've gone along and try things. Something, if it works, you do more of it. If it doesn't work, you cut it down a bit. It's basically the concept is that we want to do the music bit of it as seriously as we possibly can online.
Yeah.
But there's a limit. And there's a limit to the buzz that you get from that. It's not like the buzz from proper choral singing.
Yeah.
So then we're trying to replace it by going sideways and surrounding it by the other social things that you get from singing in a choir. Like seeing the same people, and so it's probably 50% music and 50% social.
Yeah.
I mean, you know me so well, so it's
of course. Well, it's very interesting because that's but actually that's interesting because that's how things have been working in schools. I mean, during the first lockdown, it was almost a carbon copy of what you said just then, in that people thought, well, yeah, virtual choirs, they're impossible. Lots of tech, obviously, but what you're not getting is that sense of being with others and actually hearing the overall sound. And so there are many schools, including mine, that didn't go down that route. But then we heard, I'm the current president of the Music Teachers Association, which is this, the largest organization of music teachers in the country. And we had these twice weekly Zooms for our members, of which, around about 300 joined in over the course of the summer term. And there were some schools that have carried on going with this and said, actually, the most significant thing they're able to do was to keep the community together and nurture, and B, use it for other musical learning, actually being able to look at past performances together, to introduce, other choirs and other orchestras and so on. And just dealing with those two things, the first is so important. We all bang on the whole time about the importance of music as a social construct. And in schools, about extracurricular music. That's really important. And we know, well, I'm sure we all were the people like this ourselves when we were children, that we gravitated towards the music departments at break time and lunchtime and after school, because that felt like home. And that's our community. And that's our tribe. And when we started discussing this, we thought, oh, blimey, by not doing this stuff, just saying, oh, there's no point, we're actually letting children down, because suddenly they're at home, and that home might be really wonderful for them, but in many cases it's not. And they're not knowing what to do. In some cases, there's, the connection with school is strong, in others less so. And they don't have their friends around them. So we swiftly moved to do that. And the other thing about listening to others is so important. Now, I'm just going to go back a bit. The single biggest thing that changed Tiffin Boys Choir was the internet. And it was us having a virtual learning environment. And once which we now, know as Google and Google Drive and everything. But when we had that, I said, right, okay, I'm going to put up all of the repertoire on there so they can access it, and recordings of choirs like St. John's, Cambridge doing it. And so there'll no longer be any need for me to note bash in rehearsals. That was the first thing I thought. But then actually, what happened was, I have to have up 2 or 3 major strops in the morning to ensure they actually did that and went over that. Because that, learning to sing Hymn to St. Cecilia is far more rewarding than doing mindless maths homework. I'm not talking about the important stuff, when it's just doing sums homework. But the other thing that happened, of course, was they were listening to other choirs. And how often does that actually happen? Not just for young people, I ask for those who are here, and for those who sing at choir, how often do you listen to other choirs, or is it just the thing that you're involved with? Now, I think with adults, probably yes, we do, because that's why we continue to do it. But in a school, often it'll be, right, I've got 5 periods, I've then got to go to choir, and then I've got to go home, I've got to do my homework, I've got to eat, I've got to do this. Unless you actually lead them to experiencing and listening others, it won't happen. And it's the single biggest thing, learning the sound, seeing what other people can do. So that's that's been the real benefit from here. We've also set up something this term with the Gabriellis and MTA and the HMC, just called Bark to School. It's the kind of title you'll be proud of. And
corny.
Corny, but good.
Yeah.
And this is for the Live from London series of Voces 8, which is going out at the moment. And at Christmas, they starting on Christmas Day, they've got these 6 concerts, which are the 6 cantatas of the Christmas Oratorio, with an absolute dream team. You know, Carolyn Sampson, Roddy Williams, that kind of caliber. But also in these hour-long concerts, there's an explanation about the particular cantata and of the weird instruments that are there. And we thought it'd be a good idea to see if we get as many schools as possible singing chorales together, but the sort of what we call the chorales in fancy dress. So Jesu Joy of Mansdesiring is a really good example. Awake Us Lord and Hasten, there's one for Nun Dankes one, who picked 6 of these from Bach cantatas, and the Gabriellis recorded them in October. They recorded them twice, one with singers and one with just the orchestra, and then we sent them to schools. We've got 180 schools involved in this, and they've been spending November recording these. And of course, the interesting thing about that is it's not right. You're doing your individual part and sending it in from home, but actually this is the choir, the new choirs that have been formed in schools because of bubbles and so on. And in some cases, it's alto sectionals being sent in and so on. And all of a sudden, we've got these schools up and down the country singing with period instruments, albeit a recording, but also the musical thing about actually having to be together and having to follow a beat. And for the conductor to relay that is really strong. So that'll be going out at Christmas time. But also, of course, all these schools now have those backing tracks. And and it's rather wonderful because in schools, we've had to reinvent everything in September. And there's a report that's been widely publicized today from the ISM saying about how different things are. And it's been, in some schools, brilliant, in some schools, less so. But for most places, a year group is a bubble. So it means they stay together for the whole day and you can't mix them unless you're very careful. So what that's actually meant is, you have a year 7 choir or a year 10 choir. My friend Don Gilthorpe at Ripley St. Thomas in Lancaster, another great state school, has said it was a real pain at the beginning, but the leadership that he's seeing as a result of this in like year 10 and year 11 has become far greater. And of course, they've all been sending each other their videos, and we have virtual concerts going on as well. I mean, we've again got a series of those which go out every other Thursday at 7:00 and on YouTube. And we do it at that time rather than just saying there's a concert, watch it, so that, well, you can do what you're doing actually, which is you gather your community around you. And the really lovely thing is we have live chat enabled just for the concert, and all the kids, they just comment really positively about each other's performances. We have the director of education dropping in saying, I'm so proud of you, blah, blah, blah. So there is a way of keeping this community together. And I think all of this stuff will stay.
Now, yes. I think that's crucial. I mean, I think that there will be some kind of combination.
Yeah.
Going forward, because we're learning week by week that there are advantages that didn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, for a simple black and white example, your typical choral society tenor section. There's 20 guys in the section, 5 of whom can do it backwards before they start their 12 rehearsals. 5 of whom are only ever going to get 50%. And there's a whole mishmash in the middle. In other words, they all have different requirements. So therefore, why should they all do the same process over 12 weeks?
Totally.
I mean, the way we work is that when we have rehearsals, we never sing because you can't sing. Well, we do. We sort of vaguely sing a bit, but muted. But most of it is saying in very precise detail. This is how this needs to go. That bar needs to go. That this is, and then we have lots of very well crafted learning aids. And so for tenor A, he might have to do one quick run through, which he can do it from home at whatever time suits him. Tenor B might have to do 20 run throughs to get it. And that's then the responsibility is on his shoulders.
Yes,
And I
like the
love
burden
that.
in the Messiah, isn't it? You know, I think
It's light.
yeah, totally. Well, and of course that's not just choirs, isn't it? But actually, I'm going to talk about education in a moment relating to that, and my own experiences there. But just with the choirs, of course, it's actually really difficult to sing, to record your backing track, and that's the amount of musicianship that's needed to do that well is immense. And I think it's really valuable. I mean, just in terms of that sense of not just getting it together, but of hearing your vocal quality, of looking at moments of intonation. And also the thing I find, because I've done a few things like that, is you focus on that and then you realize, hang on, there's no passion here because you've become so self-conscious. And then you go for it, and curiously enough, all of it fits together, and that's called practicing, isn't it? So actually, maybe this is a great tool for us to learn. I want to pick you up about the thing about people's needs. As I have this thing, which I know Ralph Allwood does as well, about education, which is it's a complete nonsense that we expect everyone to do the same thing at the same age and take the exams on the same day. I mean, after all, if we said, right, everyone's going to take their driving test on the 27th of June next year, all 17-year-olds are going, can you imagine the chaos there'd be in the country? And not only for those 17-year-olds, but everyone else wanting to get around wouldn't be able to do it. And yet that's what we do in education. And there's no reason why we do that. So, I mean, I experimented with something in the first lockdown, which is I formed a class of 14 to 16-year-olds across our trust, across our secondary school. So around about 25 students who were thinking of doing A-level music. And we met online like this for a lesson every Friday morning. And initially that was analyzing a piece of music, piece of Bach, in fact, Bach C major prelude. So modeling that, and they all had tasks to do, and we to put it on the screen, and we annotated and so on. But then set them their own presentations to do on a piece of music of their choice. And I'd been preparing for this by every day on Twitter. I'd put up something, well, hashtag direct listen to this, it's still on there, which is a 2 minutes 20 introduction to a different piece of music every day, and with a YouTube clip. And 2 minutes 20, because that's the limit of Twitter. And blimey, it's hard. But they were to take one of those pieces, one of those 70 pieces of music, and do their own. And blimey, the results from every single one of them was fantastic. And I looked then at some of the analytics of this online and saw the amount of views that the lessons that we'd had and what time of day they were seeing them again. And quite a lot of them were watching these lessons over and over again, usually at about 9 o'clock at night or something like that, because obviously they're teenagers, they don't function at 8:30 in the morning. It's a complete waste of time to have them in school at that time. And the depth of their responses was extraordinary. And similarly, I continued with the A-level teaching, and there are these girls in year 13 who I remember they just, on one Friday afternoon, they just couldn't stop talking about Mahler, and in real detail. And I didn't have that when I was at Tiffin, one of the highest achieving schools in the country. And it was because, for a start, through lockdown, they had the time to do it. They're not saying, "Oh, sorry, I don't have time to listen to Mahler 1 because I've got an English intervention or something rubbish." No.
And also because Mahler is engaging, particularly for that age group.
Yeah, totally. But they need to be in the right frame of mind for it, don't they? And they need also to have the time for it to permeate. And it's like cooking a steak, isn't it? You can't just eat it. You actually have to let it rest to have some taste, But it's the watching of things over again is really interesting, and there's certainly something there for us in music as well, isn't there? Being able to, let's watch the rehearsal again. Let's I mean, this is when Stephen Layton took over at Trinity College, Cambridge. He was one of the first to set up recording equipment in the theatre, the chapel. I'm so sorry. That might say something. And it was connected to the choir office next door. And the reason he set it up actually wasn't to do web broadcasts, which are now standard. It was so that every evensong could be recorded, and then a recording of that sent to every member of the choir with marked up scores. And also, the next time they perform those pieces of music, he would send them a recording of the last time they did it with certain things circled and certain things he wanted to do. So in other words, that, you know, they're using the technology there to help prepare. And that's why that choir, you know, is so good. And why it's able to sing the Christmas Oratorio from memory with the orchestra enlightenment and all the B minor mass, you know, it's extraordinary because of that leadership.
He's also got quite a very bright constituency, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, there is that, but well, I mean, yeah, do you know, that's a really interesting thing. You might unpick that a bit. Yeah, you've got to get A-star AA to get into Cambridge, and Trinity if you want to read maths. I mean, you've got to be a genius. But not all of that transfers itself to music, and I think you can. You know, I'm teaching in a comprehensive, and my choir's working really fast. Because they can, and I think we can often be too keen to put people in boxes based on systems, you know. And our system is GCSE and A level, right? And of this supposed thing where Oxbridge is the best. I went to Oxford myself; it was okay, you know. Actually, it's very good, but it's not the be all and end all. That isn't what makes you a great musician. I mean, making you a better musician is by making music, isn't it? And thinking and
working with
being open to new ideas,
working with the best people.
Yeah, totally.
It rubs off.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Tiffin, I was so fortunate to have that. To be able to develop that boys' choir. I mean, it had a few recordings under its belt in the 80s. So one was Tenstedt Mahler 8, and there was a couple of Mahler 3s there, and there's a Nutcracker with Macaris, I think. But I was given carte blanche to sort of take it further, and over the 24 years, I developed as a musician so much by doing that rep, conducting oratorios, but basically being in the same room as Papano and Gergiev and Rattle and Hickox and people, you know. And my first boys' choir gig when I was 21 was to chorus master 50 boys for Mahler 8 with Marcel, and it was terrifying, but it's great. And you know, there is that you just learn so much from seeing others do it, don't you?
Well, it sort of rubs off. It doesn't. You don't learn anything. It just sort of seeps in somehow. It contaminates you. I think.
Yeah, well, that's conducting, isn't it? I mean, you know, conducting is the same as teaching. It's a dark art, isn't it?
I think it applies to. I think it applies to all music. I mean, when I trained at Guildhall as a bassoonist, and when I was in my third or fourth year, my teacher was the first bassoon of the ECO, and the ECO wind ensemble. This is historical now, but it was James Black and Thea King and Martin Gatt and Tony Holstein, all the superstar names. And the second bassoon was going through a very difficult time in his life and kept on pulling out of things. And so they kept on asking me, "Oh, can you just come in and play?" And so I sat down with these people. And I would liken them to like Marvel comic characters, you know, Superman and Batman.
Avengers Assemble, yeah.
They were the superstars, and I think I learned more in those half a dozen rehearsals that I sat in on, in playing Mozart wind octets with those people, than I learned in 3 or 4 years at Guildhall.
Yeah,
I use the analogy of playing tennis. You know, if you play tennis with good people, you get better.
Yeah,
it's not because they're showing you how to hold it or how to hit it. It just rubs off.
That's right. It's interesting. Well, I mean, that's how cricket works, isn't it? You know, let's
I
think
wish.
about the test team.
I wish.
So, well, England. Well, you know, I mean, all these great players who join in their early 20s, and they're playing with some of the greats, and that rubs off. Yeah, I think there's also something about the sound, isn't there? It's why the Philharmonia still sounds so warm. It's always had that, and you join it and you learn it, and why the brass band tradition is still so amazing. Because, and actually, that's a really interesting tradition, isn't it? I mean, we've got a big grant from Youth Music to develop brass bands in 4 of our schools on the Lincolnshire coastline, and it was about to start in April, and then of course COVID happened. But we've got it ready to go, and the thing with this, we're having all of year 7 learning brass instruments, but then we they select 16 students in each school each year to learn in pairs, and then they form a brass band, and that's connected to their community brass band, like the Skegness Silver Band or whatever. There's also in Skegness, which is where we're leading it from, the Extraordinary Mine Workers Brass Band Festival at Butlins every January, which is amazing. And it's it's on a Saturday night, isn't it? And it's always said that on that Saturday night, if you go to any show in the West End, all the brass players have got deps in because they're in Skegness. It's true. But one of the wonderful things about that, and then the idea we replicate it the following year. So by July next year, not next year, 2022, sorry, we should have 136 brass players, all in bands. But the reason we've gone for that, apart from its authenticity, is because it's, well, a bit like what you were saying. You learn by playing with others. It's actually, it's like a choir. It's like cathedral choirs. There are 7 and 8-year-old boys and girls going in there and may be able to sing "Twinkle Twinkle Little Stars."
Who haven't got a clue.
Yeah. But you put it more bluntly than I did. But yes, that's right. Yeah, no, they haven't got a clue.
Simon,
but they're around and they're here.
Just before you go on to the cathedral choir, can I ask that we come back to the brass band, because my brass band at Junior Guildhall is stunningly brilliant.
Oh, fantastic!
This is something we should.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, let's get them down.
We'll do a joint something or other.
Yeah, well, brass band,
Anyway,
stay on it because it's at the centre of communities, and people are growing up hearing the sound, and then they pick up a cornet or whatever, and then go in, maybe able to play 1 or 2 notes, but they're surrounded by that, and that's often the opposite of the way in which we might teach the violin or something else. You've got to do your grade exams, and the only person who might ever hear them is their teacher and an examiner. And they miss out on the complete joy of that community. And it's the community that develops them. Cathedral choirs, okay, really interesting with that one. Yeah, when they're that tiny, it's exactly the same process. They're learning the sound, they're learning their behavior. But the extraordinary thing about those, by the time they're 12 and 13, they carry the whole thing, not just the treble line, the whole choir. And with you listen to St John's College, Cambridge. I mean, it's a miracle, isn't it? That such refined musicianship and expressive and such knowledge of text. But
it's not something they've been taught, like French verbs.
No. I mean, they're shown how to do it.
Yes. Yeah.
But the real core of that quality of education and musicianship is you're bringing it out of them. And that comes back to what you're saying about Trinity, Cambridge. I think everyone has this inside them, and educare is to bring out, isn't it? That's what it means. And it can come out in all kinds of different ways. Why do we have so many footballers? So many people able to play football in this country? Is it because they're innately footballerish? Why do we have more footballers than cellists? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? It's because you see football the whole time. There's not one kid knocking a football about who hasn't seen a footballer, or who doesn't have an opinion about what good is. I mean, that's the whole nature of when you go and watch sport, isn't it? About whether it's any good or not. And yet, I just kind of feel that there's so much, we can do here. And ultimately, it comes back to what we started with. It's about the relationships. It's about the human beings at the heart of it.
100%.
I've just gone into this chat and I've seen this fantastic Berlioz's 150 project, which sounds incredible. And at the time when we will be allowed to have 10,000 school students singing together, that would be amazing.
Was that from Peter Payne?
Yeah.
Yes. Bravo, Peter.
But I was in on the somewhat in the beginning, and it was thought to be extremely unlikely. But money has come forward, and although it was meant to take place in 2019 at the 150th anniversary of his death, it's now projected for 2022. But I think possibly a more enduring side shoot will be the lesson materials. I think based on Fantastic. But yeah, it's and against all expectations, it is slowly but steadily progressing.
What are they going to sing?
Well, obviously, they're talking about all people that on earth do dwell or something. I think that's one aspect that has varied over the time and what actually will be done. But I think it's likely to be in Cardiff Rugby Stadium.
Amazing.
Local connections. So it's like, and I guess there's a lot of musical interest in Wales anyway, so that's another reason.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's interesting because with the Gabriellis, Paul is just starting work on Damnation of Faust and is translating it into English because we want that to be a big Gabrielli Raw project for something like 2023 probably. And what we've both been talking about is, wouldn't it be amazing if we could actually do what Berlioz writes for in that final chorus, which is he asks for 500 children, doesn't he? Was it 200? I think it's 200 children, and he sorry, I'm getting confused with Mahler 8. It's 200 children, and he asks them to stand in among the orchestra.
All right.
Brilliant.
Which is virtually impossible in terms of health and safety, as you can imagine. I mean, my guys at Tiffin, they couldn't sort of walk down the road without sort of knocking things to one side. But the vision of that is extraordinary. And when Rattle did it a couple of years ago, didn't he, to open the LSO season? And it was my lot from Tiffin. I mean, I'd left by then, but we had 100 boys and girls from those schools, and they came in through the stalls.
Yes.
And it was beautiful, wasn't it? I mean, that sense of...
Actually, I didn't realise it was initially initiated by in the score at all. But okay.
Yeah.
I thought
it's the Berlioz scores are fascinating, that vision. He's like a sort of Byron figure, isn't he?
Yes, I suppose, yeah. No accident. I say Second Symphony was based on a poem by Byron. But...
Of course, yeah.
But
which he might not have read. That's the thing. Did he actually read Childs Harold? I think. Sorry, we could go on. This is this is good though, isn't it? But that was an amazing thing, that Rattle Damnation of Faust, because it's often, I mean, it's such a strange work, as you know, isn't it? Whether it should be staged or whether it's an oratorio, or what, it's just something in the imagination. And I can remember doing it with the boys a few years before that with the London Philharmonic and Mark Elder. And at the end of the concert, as Mark was about to take a bow, he said, "God, what an extraordinary piece! It's like something it's like Hieronymus Bosch, isn't it?"
Yes.
And that's a really good way of thinking of it. That there's everything in it. It's sort of, but there was something really beautiful about suddenly turning to the audience for that, and that sense of the optimism of the end, the soul being received into heaven, and so beautiful.
I think other views on the Goethe. Again, not sure that Berlioz followed the Goethe exactly. I think, but fascinating.
Yeah,
Simon, I'm going to jump in here. This has been absolutely brilliant. I've loved every second of it, and it's been as exciting as I thought it might be.